Hello, welcome to Locked and Leftist episode 12. We're doing a part two of our mental health series. My name is Bubble, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co host, El Diablo.
Hi everyone, it's El Diablo and it's nice to be here and yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. But yeah, thanks for joining in.
Yeah, so we want to kind of do a deeper dive into mental health care, both like where we are, why we're here, and more about what we can do about it. So I think we're going to start off with some of the history that goes back, way back in history, but a lot of what shapes mental health uh, in the modern day starts with Ronald Reagan.
Yes. So we kind of left off it was 2 weeks ago, but I know we left off at just the whole the way Reagan saw mental illness and he I feel like he didn't believe it was a real thing. It was like a moral affliction. So and the way that the country has kind of always been run is very ableist. So we need to like make that clear. It's not like it was better before him. It certainly wasn't. There are some things that maybe were like a better safety net for that time, but like there it was still pretty bad. Um, so to kind of make to come to that point. So basically when Reagan was almost assassinated, or he was shot, the person who shot him had schizophrenia. So he had this view of like wanting to talk to the person who almost killed him, and so many people advised against it. Like, what are you doing? That's just weird. And thinking that he could like kind of talk through to this guy because he's the president of the United States, and it'll work that way. And it's clear that like I don't know the motive of like why everything, the details of the person who shot him, what he was going through. So I like can't really give you that. I'm not in that person's brain basically, but it it shows you how he really was not even well liked in people with like mental illness who had severe mental illness. They didn't like him, and he didn't like them, um, and it was just super ableist. So after he had worked his way in California and deinstitutionalized so many patients and caused like a homeless crisis, he started to mass privatize everything. And when he became when he became president, it started to get worse. So and from the Civil Rights Act, can you add that in real quick? Sorry.
What's that?
The Civil Rights Act people that you were talking about.
Yeah, so, and this continues to the modern day, but mental health care, a lot of um, basically opposition to society or nonconformance is pathologized. So during the struggle for civil rights, a ton of black organizers, particularly black men, were institutionalized into asylums. They were diagnosed with various mental illnesses, and they were basically disabled that way. I think we're all very familiar with the way in which police action and legal charges are used to disable organizers, where if you're accused of a crime, that's like a year-long, multi-year process that is going to disable you from being able to organize and help your community. And they would do the same thing with mental illness diagnoses. You know, uh, you have various illnesses. No one should take you seriously. We're actually going to lock you up. Those kinds of things.
Yeah. So that's so true. Obviously, like the repercussions from that are to this day, like with talking about with what you're saying, like pathologizing. It's super it's just super ableist, but super like elitist kind of to me too, because we put these labels on people. Like as a society, we put these labels on people and we tell them that they're not good enough, but they're also not productive. And if they're not productive, then they have no value, because that's what our society is based on. It's based off productivity and profit. And this was a huge thing with like Ronald Reagan. He wanted to privatize everything because he wanted money. He wanted the economy to do really well, but for the capitalist class, for the upper class, which is what happened. Like the what was it? The air traffic controllers union actually backed him, and he ended up stabbing them in the back. Um, and that, I think that was a big moment, because the unions have completely dwindled in America to, I think, less than 10% of workers are unionized in this country, and that is, a lot of it is his fault. He was very staunchly anti-union, pro-privatization. So the fact that these union workers and like government workers backed him and were thrown under the bus is just like, obviously most of our leaders are like that, but it just kind of shows you that the only motive that mattered was profit. The way that they could get money out of these hospitals was if people could afford them. A lot of people went from mental hospitals and institutions to jails, which have become privatized, especially in California. To this day, like Kamala Harris, she was the pro prison, pro jail, like she supported the pipeline. But basically it was super privatized, so people were getting sent to all these places, and if their families have money, or if they had money, they were living off that unknowingly. They were being taken care of that way, and if they didn't, they were in the streets or in prison. Like if they got arrested, they went to jail. Some people liked being in jail and prison because they had meals. um, some people preferred the streets, and I think that's really interesting with like the pathologizing people, is because like so many homeless people that I've spoken to, not every one of them, but so many of I've spoken to were have chosen to like live outside of the system because of things like that, because there's less of a stigma, or pathologizing them and calling them these names, or like treating them as if they're like on a medical sheet, like, okay, this is what's wrong, this is what you need. And there's so much like, there is a lot of communalism. The homeless people work together a lot, they live
Mhm.
together, they barter, they have their resources, they pool their resources. And I think that, like, I get it, like, I would, we were talking about earlier, I'll say crappy because it's on YouTube, crappy life syndrome. And that's super true. Like, um, so for today, what I really want to talk about is how like the form of treatment in our society, and even before things got the way they are now, have always kind of been super individualistic and very anti-communal. Um, it's like rugged individualism. And um,
Well,
with go ahead.
before we move on, I really liked what you said about unhoused people, homeless communities. I think we need to have a whole episode on that at some point. And then the crap life syndrome, or SLS. Uh, I think that's something that's very important. I know that that has had a growing presence in like the mental health medical provider space, to where it's recognized by these doctors and these therapists. Like the main problem for a lot of people is, it's not that their brain doesn't work or whatever. It's not their pathology. It's that they have a really crappy material reality, right? They're living in poverty, extreme poverty, in an abusive situation. Um, they've suffered serious trauma. They are continuing to suffer trauma. It's not things that can be um, separately like fixed by a medical provider. It is the problems of capitalism that are, making their life terrible. And of course, you're going to have mental health problems when you're living under um, those really bad circumstances. And that's called SLS. I would encourage people to look into that.
Yeah, and what like exactly what you said. It's we're having like what we're seeing is repercussions of this lifestyle um and being around for so long. And I really do think when Reagan was in charge, it was like it was a change. It was a huge change. It was like the 80s. Everybody remembers when you think of the 80s, you think, oh, everything was bigger and better, like bigger hair, you know what I mean? But it was an era of extravagance, and it was and that's what it was basically. Like it was just wasteful and all these things. Like people forget about that, and people reminisce about the past, and that's why like I kind of brought up that it was an era of extravagance, because it's like, oh, everything was so much bigger and better, but really it really wasn't. And it leads us to today with like a lot of our plastic waste and just how everything in society has become. I think it was a catalyst to why so many people are unhappy today and can no longer even afford basic needs because of mass privatization. But that's a whole other topic. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
no,
go ahead.
it was an incredible time because for the first time since the end of World War II, there were policy choices made that, forget how much regular working people, how much their wages go up, forget about their standard of living, just pump it at the top. The richest people, the bankers and the investors and all those people, make sure that they have luxury like no one's ever seen before. And part of that was privatization of everything, like you were talking about. Reagan really slashed all kinds of government programs, government health care, government mental health care. Those were big ones that we still feel the shocks of that today, and the fact that very few Americans can afford health care. um, but yeah, no, he really unleashed a lot of economic and social forces that made the world how it is today. There was a time, um, I guess in the 60s and 70s, when at least wages were going up. There was still a lot of bad things happening, but at least wages were going up. It wasn't like a only growth at the top kind of society. But Reagan really kind of intentionally brought that in with deregulation and financialization and all of that stuff. It became all about how does Wall Street make money? Screw everybody else. How does Wall Street make the biggest profits? And how can we financialize all of these businesses and like even infrastructure? Like how do we profit from roads and railways and hospitals and all these different things?
Yeah, totally. The infrastructure of the country, which so deeply relies on that, has completely failed. And that's like every facet of infrastructure, like you talked about, like roads, schools, hospitals, everything, because of that. Because let's be real, when the country was primarily white, Anglo-Saxon, um, they did spend more on social services and things you needed, and that's just something like that I saw in this documentary, which I want to plug later. I'll have the name up in a bit later, but it's true. And then as a country, it's not just about that, but like as time goes on, the country has become a melting pot, like they say, and money is still spent in like NIMBY cities and like upper middle class cities, which are primarily white areas. And creating sort of like ghettos in America, or gentrifying them later on. Um, and what was I going to say? Oh, so I saw this tweet, and you reminded me of it real quick. And it was saying by the time the oldest boomers were old enough to afford houses, the ratio from affording a home to like annual salary wages, it was 50. Like, so your salary was, I don't know, 5 grand, and your house was 10 grand. Like you could afford to buy it. I think a decade later, it was like 38% to that. And then maybe 20 years after that, it was 18%. It was around that time. And it's just shows you how the wages have not kept up, and you could buy a house for like the house that I live in right now, I don't own it, but when the owner that has it, her father bought it. He bought it for like $12,000. It's worth like almost 2 million. So that's crazy. But going back to the mental health treatment, sorry, I got sidetracked. But I really wanted to kind of echo on like the treatment is so bad even if you do have the money, but if you don't, it's worse. So um like Bubble said, pathologizing is a big issue. We see things like that, as well as like labeling people like drugs as drug seekers, like I said, and kind of having health issues be a moral failing. It's really, it is a big thing in medicine. They say it's not, but it is. Like you see it with when you go to the doctors and you're fat and they tell you just to lose weight, or if you're a minority, women's health, even men's health, I'm sure, like especially if you're poor and not wealthy, they kind of don't really treat you. They don't listen. A lot of some doctors are really great. I'm not saying they aren't, but a lot of doctors won't listen to you. They won't. They'll kind of start cutting you off and saying, "Oh, well, I don't know if that's real. You have to fight really hard to get tests." Like I'm going to use myself as an example. Right now, I'm like I have decent health care. I won't in a couple weeks, but I had to fight really hard to get tests for symptoms that I myself had to track down for 2 years and write down every single day, like, okay, what's going on, and had to show them a list and then be like, I need you to test me for this. I need you know what I mean? Like I'm doing the work. And I'm not a doctor and stuff like that. And that's for like physical health. But it's basically you're doing most of the work in your own medical care, but then at the same time, if you're self-diagnosing or you think you have something wrong and the doctor's not helping you, they tell you to not self-diagnose, or they call you a hypochondriac, which is not fair because there are a lot of people who know they have depression but they can't afford to see a doctor, or they just have crappy life syndrome like you're talking about, because a lot of it is our quality of life is so bad that like you're unhappy, and when you're unhappy, your brain is not working right and the chemicals in your brain aren't working right. And when I worked in mental health, we taught our clients this because they were from underserved communities. They couldn't afford health care, and they when they were on disability, they could only have $2,000 in assets, or else they'd be kicked off disability. So they're kept at poverty level. That's all they can have. Um, and they also can't get the treatment they need. And if they were to make more money, like, and to get that treatment, even if they got it, it would still suck and they'd be billed for it. So we kind of teach people in these communities, like, okay, these are like, this is the science of it. As far as we know, take what you will from it. But your brain obviously produces dopamine and serotonin when you're doing well, and if you don't have a chemical imbalance, and when you're not doing well, these chemical like a chemical imbalance can occur. You can be deprived of dopamine and serotonin because you're working all the time and you're depressed and you're not happy and you're hungry and you don't have health. Like it just goes on and on and on. So we kind of try to tell people like, okay, like I know we can't help you with this. We have an in-house um, psychologist that offers free services, but like that's all we can do. We can't do anything else. We can't prescribe medication. And we had to kind of tell our clients that like yeah, take what you with the information. If you feel like you have depression, we're not going to tell you you don't. We're going to help you work around it. And again, that was with the guidance of an actual doctor. So I don't want to like say anything that people are like, oh, you can't just tell people they have illnesses. Like he was an actual medical doctor. But yeah, I don't know, Bubbles, do you have anything to say about that?
Um, I mean, I just want to second what you're saying, and I've personally seen it and experienced it a lot. There's so much distrust of people based on racism and classism and misogyny. Um, I've seen a lot of uh, labeling people as drug seekers, and then it's really shitty because it's just like, just get out of here, and like you're pretending about the pain. I don't want to give you any medication, and then people die and they go into septic shock because people have those preconceived notions about them. Um, and just distrusting people, particularly people of color, particularly women, about their symptoms, which again lead to all kinds of horrible health outcomes. And there's such a difference in medical care of, having money or having access versus not. Um, it. I've seen, like, I was in a car accident, and then because I had a lawyer paying for everything as part of the case, it was like, wow, I could actually access healthcare, and it was amazing. There's no more like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Like, there's no one in your network, and no more excuses. No more like, we can't do that. It was all always like, can do. Like, you got the money,
Mm,
yeah. Specialist, X-rays, MRIs, no problem. Like, totally different world.
yep. Totally different. We like totally live in completely different worlds from the people who have the money to access those things. Um, and I'm like not just talking about like, oh, like money, like you make 80 grand a year, you have employer health care, like because I do know people who have that type of coverage, and it's good. It's way better than like not having it, of course. But like I'm not the type of person who would be like count your blessings because dude, it sucks out here. Like it's really hard out here. So, but even people like that get denied uh, for treatment, and then it or yeah, their healthcare denies a test for them, and it's like, how much are you paying? Like it's crazy. But to add on to that, like there's this I don't know if I'm allowed to say these like for educational purposes, but like we're going to be talking about like I'm going to be talking about some heavy stuff like with mental health and when you're feeling really bad, you don't want to like live it, like when people feel that way. um there's like this culture around when people feel that bad. I really don't know if I'm gonna get flagged here, so if my words sound weird, guys, kind of like context clues, okay? But when you're not feeling really good and you're calling hotlines like, oh, I don't feel good, I feel like I can't make it anymore, there's this culture of like victim blaming and self blaming going around in that. Uh, and then if a celebrity, like when Robin Williams passed away, people were posting the number, the hotline to call if you're feeling that way. um and that's not really helpful. Like, I'm sorry, it's not. It's nice of you to put the number out for people who might actually need it, but um in again, it's some of the only resources some people have. Like, I get it, but it kind of puts the person in the position of like reaching or doing all the work themselves again, which I get. If you don't have healthcare, we've all been there. This is what the society perpetuates. But to do this work yourself, and if you don't do it, and if you fail, and if you eventually like pass away, like how Robin Williams passed away, people will be like, oh, please reach out for help. And you call those numbers and they kind of don't really help you. There's no safety net for people like that. You can't just like that. There's just a phone number to call. There's a hotline for that, but they don't actually do anything. They just talk you down. And if you've made up your mind, you've made up your mind. And that sucks. But also people fear that like if they call those numbers, they're gonna get locked up and institutionalized. Police are gonna show up to their house, brutalize them, then lock them up for a 72-hour hold. And the reason I bring that up is because like obviously our show really does talk about arming yourself, and in California it's called 5150. And then if it happens again, I believe it's 5250. But basically, like, there's so many systems in place that treat you as if you're not human, if you're not feeling well, or like um and then they strip you of like of your rights that are your American God-given rights, to like the Second Amendment. And I know that like that's not that important in issues with mental illness, especially if you don't feel safe owning a firearm. I totally get it. But we have this idea that if someone is like mentally ill or sick or not feeling well, that they're like branded, they're pathologized, and it's like you're never gonna get out of that funk, or you're not that funk, that's not a right way, like because people live with this for the rest of their lives. And I get it, but it's like you're kind of treated as you're like not safe to be trusted to be by yourself, and or be around weapons. And I do get it, if you're not comfortable, don't do it. I do not recommend that at all. But it just kind of brands you, it treats you as a child. That's how they treat you. If you don't have the money or care, you do get institutionalized, and the care is not really well. Like it, depending on what you're going in for, some people go in for things like skin picking, drug abuse. They've had a bad episode when they were on drugs, or bipolar disorder. And in these hospitals, they kind of treat you as if like you're either here to stay for the rest of your life, or you're going to be on the street very soon. So they don't really help you in a systemic way. I think there's good doctors, people that can help you, but you're either kicked out or you stay there for life, and your needs aren't met. Like some people will get tackled just for disagreeing with the doctor's decision, and they brand you as what's the word I'm looking for, when they say a patient is like not working with them well. I can't think of the word for some reason. They're like, oh,
Non-compliant.
yeah, non-compliant. They brand you as not, sorry, my brain, non-compliant, and then you have that on your record that you're a non-compliant patient. So every doctor you see after that is going to come in with a bias that oh, there could be like no possible way that the doctor you saw or the hospital you went to before treated you bad. Oh, you're just not compliant. So you have this on your record, and then some people have to go to court for these issues, and it just gets worse. So you get stuck in this system of not only, can you still hear me? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Not only poverty, but like you're seen as a crazy person, or a non-compliant, and it it makes it so much harder to reach out. You can't really reach out to friends or people because they think you're also this crazy person in this system. Like I've personally known people who have said, "Oh, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with that." And I mean, that's true. You don't need to be like emotional labor for people all the time, but we're so individualistic that we consider like supporting your friends as emotional labor. I think that's crazy, like in my opinion. Since we all live under capitalism, people don't have that bandwidth to support each other. And then like you needing therapy and dealing with that, and then not being able to afford it, and also it's not working, and then you have to pay for it. And then again, the fear of mandated report, getting thrown into a psychiatric hold, which leads to more systemic abuse, and being homeless. Like I talked about earlier with being homeless, people discard homeless people as addicts, mentally or clinically insane, or lazy. And I find it telling that lazy is one of the biggest things they say, because oh, they can work for their money too, like that's what we do. And it's like, okay, but it's not about that. Like it's it's so hard for me to understand when people say that. Like I just can't relate to people who think that way. Society's rules are like very rigid, and like we talked about earlier, homeless people really work together to survive. I've met so many people that do that. They migrate to warmer areas in the winter together. They pool their money together. Sometimes if they like, they even buy cars together, like they do. And there's community involved, and they find that they can be each other's moral support, and feed each other and help each other better together as a unit. And like we can't figure that out, and we, because we're so worried about losing what we have. I think I don't get it. Like maybe that's what it is, losing your housing if you're helping someone. And yeah, I don't know, there's just a lot of that.
I think a lot of that also blows my mind, but I think it comes from like not understanding how things work. Like I feel like a lot of people who are like, yeah, that homeless person looks able-bodied. Why don't they just get a full-time job? It's like the only way you could think that is if you don't know what applying for a job is like. Maybe you haven't applied for a job in 10 or 20 years. Um, because there's no way. I mean, like my brother, um, when he was in high school applying to McDonald's, like he would have enough knowledge to know that that is really stupid because you need a cell phone number, you need an address, you need a social security number, you need work history, and all these different things. Um, but I wanted to go back to what you were saying about hotlines and when it comes into the mainstream through a celebrity death or something like that, it is very frustrating because I think that's another case of people just having no idea like what world they live in. Because a common thing you'll hear is like there is help available, there is support for you, there is not. Like um a typical story of suicidal depression is like you have a chronic illness and you work too much and that makes your chronic illness worse, and if you stop working you're going to get evicted, and you owe money to some family and you have to pay them back or else they're going to get evicted, but if you pay them back you're going to miss rent, you're going to get evicted, and also your kid is like crying because she's hungry, and that's when you get suicidal because you have no way out. And the idea that it's like, well, we have a national suicide hotline, it's like, what what universe do you live in? Um, but yeah, the rest of what you talked about, like inherent biases, especially towards people who've been struggling with mental illness and have, are often unhoused. Um, that I mean, that plays a huge role in discrimination and making life difficult for people who have mental health issues. Um, but it's all part of a larger system of denying people care and just really crushing them with capitalism. Americans as a whole, the averages, our life expectancy is going down, our wages and standard of living is going down, especially since inflation exploded. um, so of course that's going to heavily impact our mental health, and it has. Suicides are way up, drug abuse is way up. um, and yeah, it's just it's a lot of it is a matter of policy and the systemic decisions. It's you know people don't even seem to care that much about mass shootings anymore. But I remember a few years ago, one of the lines people would take is, "Oh, it's a mental health issue. Like this is just a mental health problem." Um, which there's some arguments there, but you're not doing anything about it. No one ever did anything about it. Um, so yeah, I mean, a lot of these are policy problems, and I guess in an ideal world or a world that functioned, we could just change the policies. But because this is a capitalist world where a few rich and powerful people make all the decisions, um, we have to do the best that we can, and we have to create our own support networks and infrastructure and do our own things.
Yeah, no, that everything you said is so true. I really liked what you said about like obviously being able-bodied and being able to like work or whatever, and when I said like it's not about that, it's not about being productive and adding more capital to like it's just I, to people with a mindset with a capitalist approving mindset, I guess, because they're not capitalists, most people. But people who do prefer that and want that, um they can't really see like the flaw in that thinking because it capitalism is again so hyper individualistic that it's like, oh, it's your moral failing that this happened and this happened. And it's just bizarre, like unfortunately it's so conditioned into our reality, And to this day, a lot of people regard like Reagan as the best modern day president, and it's because a lot of people think that way, and especially a lot of people who have like immigrants, like we've talked about before, like immigrants from Cuba or Vietnam who don't, subscribe to like Vietnam's politics, like Ho Chi Minh and like communism, or and people from countries that like kind of had different different type of society or was at war with the USA. And I noticed that like with some people in my family too, like, oh, they support like, private property and stuff. And so America is like built off that, like, oh, this is the American dream, and this is like where you're supposed to go, and you'll get everything you want for if you just work hard enough for it. And we know that that's just not happening. And again, with you talking about the mother who has the kid and she doesn't feel well, she's suicidal, and she she's losing her job, and then she calls the hotline, and then they take her kids. Like it gets worse. There's no safety net, and we call it like playing the tape and just seeing how much worse it gets. And it's like you're stuck. Like you said, you're stuck, and there is no help for people. What people need is financial help. Of course they need help with therapy and stuff, but people need money.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, that's what we need. We need a
Yeah.
lot of it. Yeah.
Or just, ultimately resources. The resources are not available to you if you don't have the money, if you don't have the capital. And that is a choice that we kind of arbitrarily made as a society. Um, and I mean, a hopeful thing as policies get worse in a lot of places, I mean, particularly Texas, where I live, is I think a lot of people are kind of uh, seeing the truth in a lot of ways due to recent events. I mean, I had a recent conversation with some older people, and it started like, why don't young people want to work anymore? And they respect me, so they were able to listen to me. But I said, first of all, young people work a ton. Young people work long hours. Young people are volunteering more than ever. They're working out more than ever. But on the other hand, like you lived through the lockdowns. We all lived through the lockdowns. Um, a ton of people were not working. Like 60, 70% of people were not working. And nothing fell apart. There's been a lie for a long time. When I was a kid, I can remember people telling this lie, like without capitalism, everything would fall apart. No one could eat, you know, nothing would get built, all the air conditioning and electricity would fail. And it's like we were locked down for like a month and a half, and it was pretty much fine. Like, yeah, a lot of people had to work throughout that period, which is a problem with the hierarchy in our society and the unfair distribution of labor. But the fact is, we cut the amount of work being done by like 2/3, and it was fine. Like we don't, we
Hmm.
don't have to do all this productivity. We don't have to do this endless expansion and endless work. Um, and the truth is that it enriches only the people at the very top. Um, you know, people in the middle and at the bottom, their lot in life, their standards of living have not been improving. So we're just, we're working hard for no reason, in the way that capitalism tells us to.
Yeah. Uh, we don't have the same, we work, I'd say we work twice, maybe three times as hard. We have so many more jobs. Like, we're just not seeing the benefits of it. So it's like, what's the point? Um, there is no point. And we don't, and I think we have more empathy or compassion as like, and we do, like, we see that now again with the communal type of living that we seem to prefer or want. And yeah, it's just different. And
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry. Um, I was saying, I think a lot of people are starting to do this and realize, that it's a matter of like where we direct our work. Like, is it directed in a way that supports us and supports our community, supports our mutual aid? And a lot of people are doing that, working together, combining resources, supporting each other. And ultimately, I think that's the best path forward for people listening to this, to work on mental health, to address mental health, because we can't change the policies. There have been all these political campaigns, there have been all these social movements, um, and they haven't accomplished very much. I don't want to take away from the accomplishments that have been hard won, but millions of dollars, millions of of labor hours spent, volunteers, working long hours, month in, month out for years, uh, and it hasn't built what it could have. I think a lot about the Bernie Sanders campaign, a million campaign volunteers, like $15 million fundraised from like low income people. If you put that towards a mutual aid network, we would have better lives right now. If you had a million people working towards helping each other in terms of like supporting each other with mental health, I think just talking to each other, sharing with each other, relying on each other for emotional as well as material support um, is super important towards addressing mental health, because most mental health problems are caused by the material conditions that capitalism puts us under. It's caused by having a crappy life circumstances, and most of those crappy life circumstances are caused by capitalism. Um, when it comes to like mental health crises, I think it's really important that people make crisis plans with their friends and family, with their mutual aid networks. If this happens, we're gonna do this. If you're in crisis, I'm gonna come over there and stay with you for a few hours, or you're gonna come over here. You talked about weapons earlier. I have had to collect weapons from people in my mutual aid network. I'm a big believer in weapons. I think, um, they obviously enhance the power that you have as an individual. You can be the best MMA fighter, but that's going to be enhanced if you have weapons. But if you're in a mental health crisis, they can become a danger to yourself. So I've had to collect weapons, and if you have weapons, you should have a plan. If you're going into a crisis, who is going to take my weapons? Talk to them, figure out like how to take them, how to store them. Um, Safe places. If anyone could find themselves in an abusive situation or other reason they need to seek out a safe place, planning safe places, whether it be your friends or family's houses, or even public locations. Like here, we have a lot of quick trip gas stations, and they're all marked as safe places. Um, and I'll see people hanging out there. I'll see teenagers in crisis there. I'll see people taking advantage of that. Um, and again, like regular meetings, social meetings, organizing meetings, keeping in contact with people protects them and protects you. So I think all that work to build mutual aid networks, um, and really commit to that as being a part of your life, supporting other people and allowing other people to support you is how we can best organize to address mental health in kind of the wasteland that we have right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Kind of being there for each other as much as we can, and the steps, like there's so many steps you can take, like if you don't have money or the care that you need. I like did I'll say this, like if you find comfort in like cannabis and it helps you a lot with your anxiety or like depression or just life being crappy, um I like am fully in support of that. Like I I think again, we talked about this before, like the way people view drugs, and I don't view drugs that way personally. I think there are cases where people are addicted to drugs, and I think that's like a trauma thing. But that's my own personal thoughts. But like, I think people should be able to kind of do whatever they want and ease themselves in ways that like it just if it helps, it helps. So like if you want to take cannabis or others that like go for it if you're safe, be safe. That's all I care about. Like follow harm reduction techniques. There are so many online like SAMHSA, which is like the big substance abuse use, has like a $30 million grant in harm reduction, so you can just even go online and follow things or ask people who are more experienced. So I think just be safe. That's like my biggest thing. But yeah, do what you need to do to kind of ease yourself and comfort yourself, because you can't some people can't get medication they need if it's like an actual mental health crisis. If it's just like life, like we talked about, circumstances under capitalism that make life unbearable, like I get it, do what you have to do. Disclaimer, like be safe. Again, I know it's on YouTube, so I can't really say much, but um like I want people to know that there are so many things you can do that like help your, like Bubbles talked about, like weapons having to put away or locked away. If you have pets, like also that's a big one. Like a year ago I could not take care of my pets, so like my family really helped me, and they're like my favorite thing in the world. So you can have people who can help you with your pet, with your kids, again, friends and family. Like there's so many things you can do, of course, provided that like you have those resources as well. If you don't have family or anyone around, it's harder to do these things, I understand. But like in I want to say like in my community, and our community, like we do kind of, as far as like ethnically, we kind of support each other in that way, like with elderly, taking care of the kids. And like, so if you can find resources like that in your friends, hopefully you can, and they can help you with that. Like if you need to work and you guys don't work on the same days, like, oh, I'll watch the kids these days and stuff, so it's just easier on you, and then you have a day off. Plan it out so it's like a self-care thing. Self-care like is really important. I think I look at it in a weird way with like, oh, it's like a very capitalistic version of self-care, like, oh, just buy these skincare product. Like, yeah, I get it, it's kind of dumb, but like, no, you do need to take like days to yourself, like go on a walk, go take a nap, do these things for yourself, like to help yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of self care can be augmented, or in worst cases, can even rely on your network, your community. Um, I think that starts with communicating. If people feel themselves spiraling towards a crisis, they need to communicate that to the people that care about them. Um, and those people can play an important role in pulling them out of it. So like if you're depressive, a common thing that will happen is like you stop cleaning your living space, and that will make your depression even worse. um, if you have some friends and you reach out to them like, hey, I need some help, and it helps to be specific because people often don't know how to help. But if you're like, hey, can you, two or three of you, like come over, like take me on a walk, and like do a little bit of cleaning. Like I really want to clean, but I feel like I can't. And then if you walk, clear your head, come back to a cleaner environment, that can be really helpful for your mental health. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that is very important, and I think again, a lot of it depends on having people around you. And if you don't have people around you, like it's probably very intimidating to try to find people to be around you, to be that support network. But there are people wherever you are, trying to build support networks. So
Mm-hmm.
I as a step one, I definitely encourage people to find more comrades.
Yeah, 100%. Because, like, yeah, if you don't have those resources, or if the people around you are not the safest, like, yeah, you know, of course, totally get you can't do those things. We get it, and like also like a pride thing too. Like if you feel embarrassed to ask for help, like with the especially cleaning, a lot of people feel that way. Like I would too, personally. Um, so if you do feel that, like it's okay, like it's okay. It's good if it takes you more time. Just that's fine, like let it take more time. If you need to find mutual aid groups, or just like people who are like comrades like us, like you can find that like online. I know that there are people around. You can feel really alone, but there are people around. And oh man, I forgot what I was going to say, sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's
Um,
something, yeah.
but yeah, and a lot of people like don't know. Um, they might not know like what they have to offer, or like would people even want me in their mutual aid network? Would they want me in their group? Will they like me? Um, but I think what you'll find is if you show up and you help other people, that will help you. That will improve your mental health, because being useful to other people is a deeply ingrained part of the human experience, and we are programmed for that to release good feelings. Um, but that will also make other people want to help you. So it's a positive reinforcement loop. It's it's this cycle of um, you know feeling better and getting stronger yourself, and helping other people feel better and get stronger. And that's how these support networks build and grow.
Yeah, totally. One more thing on that, like if you go to like support groups that are not like they're not for profit, like again, like AA, NA, so many other ones that like are like that, they do actually really, depending on your experience, where the group, like where it is, if you can find people that are like that in those groups, since they are not for profit and they are like very, what's very important to those types of groups is like keeping things like if it's going to benefit the person, like keep things within the group or like within the people you trust, because like if you feel like you can't take care of your kids, they'll probably help you, like, and they won't be like, oh, that's, you're a bad parent. Like they're not, I mean, some people might, but like I've personally seen that in clients helping like each other, and like keeping it, quiet, like, hey, like, okay, this person needs help and I'm not going to get them in trouble. They're just in a bad place. They're not harming anyone. I've seen that personally. So I think like if you want to go places like that, you can go to places like that because they will help you. It is very community based, but again, find, if you can find the right group. Not all of them are like that, but and I think I kind of remembered what I was going to say, but like it was like super way before. I don't know if we kind of talked about it, but like since we have a couple minutes left, let's just briefly talk about it. With everything we talked about, like in having money and not having money, even if you do, the treatment's not that great. There is an exception to that rule where we talked about like really wealthy people and the rich. And sorry, I forgot to bring this up, but like rich people are allowed to take like year-long sabbaticals and um, do whatever and go to treatment facilities that cost so much money, like $100,000 for like a 20-30 day trip, and get any medication, doctor treatment. They can leave the country for better health care. Like we've seen our own politicians go for like dental surgery. So, which is awful because they're like, don't care about our healthcare, but they're able to do their own treatment. So it's like that's a big a big problem too, where wealthy people are able to get those resources in countries that do have socialized medical care too. And I wanted to bring that up because it's important for class consciousness, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, there's so much disparity in access like that and social attitudes. I mean, I know a ton of rich people who are doing hard drugs, um, Xanax, Adderall, cocaine, even, heroin sometimes. And they're fine. Like they don't get crap from society. They don't get criminalized. Um, one thing that I always tell people who are very anti-drugs, who are very pro-war on drugs or something like that, is it's like, look, every single fraternity party in the United States has hard drugs. Like any college, University of Texas, Harvard, um, UC Berkeley, whatever. These Greek life kids, these fraternities and sororities, they always have hard drugs. Why aren't they
Mhm.
getting raided? Where are the SWAT raids? Like, you want to find a pile of cocaine, go hit up Wall Street. All
Yeah.
these investment bankers have piles of cocaine. I promise you, everyone knows it. Um, so yeah, huge class disparities like that. Another reminder for why we need to build our own power. But I do have to step out a little bit early. Um, if we can go ahead and wrap up here. My name is Bubble. You can find me on Twitter at BubbleBreakBS. Also follow my airsoft and martial arts and all that fun stuff project at a airsoftist, anarcho airsoftist. Also on Twitter and Instagram, we do a lot of rad stuff. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you as always to my co-host El Diablo.
Yeah, thanks guys for joining us. Thanks Bubbles for having a good show, and I know you have to leave soon. Yeah, El Diablo at on Twitter at LakesDL. It's spelled like it's down, and I'm pretty sure it's right there. I don't know if you guys can see it though. But yeah, thank you, and we will see you guys next time.
Take care, y'all.